What happens when someone in the audience says something so shocking that the entire story changes instantly and nobody, not the guest, not the crew, not even Dr. Phil himself, is prepared for what comes next? Stop the tape. Stop it right now. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a knife. His hand went up toward the control booth. The cameras kept rolling for 3 more seconds before the red lights finally went dark. The woman in the audience who had just stood up was trembling, her hands still covering her mouth. And the guest on stage, a 34-year-old mother named Sarah who had come to talk about her missing sister, just stared at the audience member with an expression that can only be described as pure, paralyzing shock. What that audience member revealed in the next 60 seconds would unravel a 15-year-old mystery that no one saw coming. The taping had started like any other Dr. Phil episode. Sarah Martinez sat in the guest chair, tissues already in her lap, ready to talk about her sister Emily who had vanished without a trace in 2009. The case had gone cold. Police had no leads. The family had spent over a decade in agonizing limbo, not knowing if Emily was alive, dead, or somewhere in between. Dr. Phil had done his homework. He had Emily's case file, police reports, witness statements. This was supposed to be a straightforward episode about a family seeking closure, maybe generating new tips from viewers. Sarah explained how Emily had left for work one morning and simply never came home. No phone call. No note. Her car was found abandoned at a rest stop 3 hours away. Her purse was inside. Her phone was turned off. And then, nothing. 15 years of nothing. Every day I wake up and wonder if today will be the day someone calls, Sarah said, her voice breaking. Every day I check my phone thinking maybe, just maybe, she'll reach out. But it's been 15 years, Dr. Phil. 15 years. The audience was silent. This was the kind of story that hit everyone in the room, the terror of not knowing, the endless waiting, the hope that slowly curdles into something darker. Dr. Phil leaned forward in his chair, about to ask his next question, when a woman in the third row suddenly stood up. "Excuse me," the woman said. Her voice was shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I have to say something." Dr. Phil paused. This wasn't supposed to happen. Audience members don't interrupt. They don't speak unless called on. The producers in the booth were already scrambling. But something in the woman's face, pure anguish mixed with something that looked like guilt, made Dr. Phil hold up his hand to the crew. "Go ahead," Dr. Phil said carefully, his eyes locked on the woman. "My name is Linda," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I think I know what happened to Emily." The studio went completely silent. Sarah froze. Dr. Phil's expression shifted from curiosity to intense focus in half a second. "Linda," Dr. Phil said slowly. "What are you saying?" Linda's hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the seat in front of her. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know until just now. But when you showed that picture of Emily on the screen, I recognized her. I know her." Nobody in that studio was breathing. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of what would become one of the most intense moments in the show's history. "Linda," Dr. Phil said, standing up now, "I need you to be very clear. What are you telling us?" "My ex-husband," Linda said, tears streaming down her face now. "My ex-husband, he brought a woman to our house in 2009. He said she was his cousin visiting from out of state. Her name was Emma. She stayed with us for 3 months. But Dr. Phil, that woman in the picture you just showed, that's her. That's Emma. That's Emily." Sarah let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of 15 years of grief and confusion and desperate hope all colliding in a single moment. Dr. Phil turned to the control booth. "Stop the tape. Stop it right now." This is when Dr. Phil became more than a television host. This is when he became exactly what that family needed in that impossible moment. The red lights on the cameras went dark. Dr. Phil immediately turned to his producers, who were already rushing onto the stage. "Get building security to lock down the exits. Nobody leaves this building. Call the LAPD. I want detectives here in 5 minutes. And someone get me Linda's full name and contact information for her ex-husband right now." Then he turned to Sarah, who looked like she might collapse. "Sarah, breathe. Just breathe. We're going to get through this." He turned to Linda, who was still standing in the audience shaking. "Linda, you did the right thing. This took incredible courage. I need you to come down here and talk to me." The studio audience watched in stunned silence as Linda made her way down to the stage. Dr. Phil had a producer bring her a chair. Another producer brought water. This wasn't television anymore. This was real life unfolding in real time. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil sat down across from Linda, his full attention on her. Sarah sat frozen in her chair, unable to process what was happening. "Linda," Dr. Phil said gently but firmly, "I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Linda took a shaky breath. "My ex-husband Mark and I divorced in 2011. The marriage was bad. He was controlling. Paranoid. He had cameras everywhere in our house. He monitored everything I did. And this woman he brought home?" Dr. Phil prompted. "He said she was his cousin Emma from Nevada. She needed a place to stay for a few months while she figured some things out. I didn't question it because Mark didn't let me question things." But looking back now, Linda's voice cracked. She was terrified. She barely spoke. She never left the house. And Mark watched her constantly. Sarah's hands were gripping the arms of her chair so hard her knuckles were white. "Where is she now?" Sarah whispered. "Where is my sister?" This is the moment Dr. Phil had to make a choice between television and humanity. And he chose humanity. Dr. Phil held up his hand. "Sarah, I know you need answers. But right now, we need to do this right. Linda, did this woman, did Emma, did she ever say anything to you? Did she ever try to reach out?" Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Once. Just once. I was in the kitchen, and she came in, and she grabbed my hand and she said, 'Please help me.' But before I could say anything, Mark walked in and the look he gave her, she never said anything to me again." "Did you ever see her after you and Mark divorced?" Dr. Phil asked. "No. When I told Mark I was leaving, he said Emma had gone back to Nevada. I never saw her again. I never thought. God, I should have known. I should have done something." Dr. Phil leaned forward. "Linda, listen to me. You are doing something. You're doing it right now. What you just did took more courage than you know." Behind the scenes, producers were already on the phone with law enforcement. Dr. Phil's team had dealt with situations like this before, cases that started as television segments and became active investigations. They knew the protocol. But what nobody expected was what happened next. A producer walked onto the stage and handed Dr. Phil a note. He read it, and his expression changed. He looked at Linda. "Linda, you said your ex-husband's name is Mark. What's his last name?" "Henderson. Mark Henderson." Dr. Phil looked at Sarah. "Sarah, did your sister ever mention anyone named Mark Henderson?" Sarah's face went pale. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" "Yes. She had a customer at the coffee shop where she worked. He came in every day. She said he made her uncomfortable. She said he asked too many questions. His name was Mark." The pieces were falling into place in real time. And every single person in that studio could feel it. Dr. Phil stood up. He turned to the camera, not the television cameras, but the security camera in the corner of the studio. He looked directly into it and he spoke in a voice that was calm but absolutely commanding. "If Mark Henderson is watching this right now, know that we have contacted law enforcement. If you know anything about Emily Martinez, I strongly suggest you contact your attorney and cooperate with police immediately." Then he turned to Linda. "Linda, detectives are on their way. They're going to need to talk to you. They're going to ask you a lot of questions. You did the right thing by speaking up. He turned to Sarah. Sarah, I can't promise you this leads where you hope it leads. But this is the first real lead in 15 years. And we're going to follow it. The studio was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He walked off the stage and directly to the production booth. His voice came through loud and clear on the studio speakers. I want every second of this footage preserved. I want copies made for law enforcement. And I want our entire legal team on standby. We're not airing this until we know what we're dealing with. Then he came back to the stage and did something he rarely does. He sat down on the edge of the stage, not in his chair, not in his host position, but right there on the floor level with Sarah and Linda. Here's what happens now. Dr. Phil said quietly. Detectives arrive. They interview Linda. They get Mark Henderson's last known address. They start investigating. Sarah, you and your family need to prepare yourselves. This could go several ways. We might find Emily. We might find information about what happened to her. Or we might hit another dead end. But for the first time in 15 years, you're not waiting in the dark anymore. Sarah was crying. Linda was crying. Half the audience was crying. Dr. Phil pulled a card from his jacket pocket and handed it to Sarah. This is the direct line to my office. Not the show's office, my office. If you need anything during this investigation, you call that number. Day or night. Then he pulled out another card and gave it to Linda. And you're going to need support too. What you did today is going to change your life. You're going to need therapy. You're going to need legal guidance. We're going to make sure you have both. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. 2 LAPD detectives arrived within 10 minutes. They took Linda to a private room backstage. They took statements from Sarah. They requested all footage from the taping. And then, while everyone was still processing what had happened, one of the detectives came back and spoke quietly to Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil's expression changed. He nodded. He spoke briefly to the detective. Then he turned to Sarah. Sarah, the detectives need to speak with you privately. Right now. Sarah stood up, her legs shaking. Dr. Phil walked with her toward the backstage area. Before they disappeared, Dr. Phil turned back to the audience. What you witnessed today is why we do this show, he said. Not for entertainment. Not for ratings. But because sometimes, just sometimes, bringing people together and letting them tell their stories can change everything. 3 hours later, after the audience had been dismissed and the studio had cleared, Dr. Phil sat alone in his office reviewing the footage. The detectives had taken Linda's statement. They had obtained a warrant for Mark Henderson's last known address. And they had found something, security footage from a property Henderson owned in rural Nevada, showing a woman matching Emily's description. But they wouldn't know for sure until they reached the location. Until they knocked on that door. Until they saw who answered. Dr. Phil had been doing this show for over 2 decades. He had dealt with addiction, abuse, custody battles, and criminal cases. But this was different. This wasn't a planned intervention. This wasn't a structured episode. This was chaos transforming into hope in real time. He picked up his phone and called Sarah personally. We don't have answers yet, he told her. But we have a lead. A real lead. And law enforcement is moving on it right now. On the other end of the line, Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then she said quietly, Thank you for stopping the tape. There was never a question. Dr. Phil replied. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The investigation that began that day would take months to unfold. Mark Henderson was located and questioned. The property in Nevada was searched. And eventually, there would be answers. Not all of them easy. Not all of them what the family hoped for. But answers nonetheless. Linda would later say that standing up in that audience was the hardest thing she'd ever done. But also the most important. She had carried guilt for years without even knowing why. And when she saw Emily's picture on that screen, something inside her broke open. Dr. Phil would later tell his team, "We're in the business of helping people. Sometimes that happens on camera. Sometimes it happens when you turn the cameras off. You have to know the difference." The manila envelope that had been sitting on the table between the chairs, initially meant to hold Emily's case file, became a symbol of something else entirely. It became a reminder that sometimes the most important evidence isn't what you bring to the studio. It's what walks in through the audience doors. This episode never aired in its original form. Instead, with the family's permission and law enforcement's approval, a special was produced months later documenting the investigation and its outcome. What viewers saw was a carefully edited version of events, with certain details protected for legal reasons. But those who were in the studio that day, the audience members, the crew, the producers, they carried the full weight of what had happened. One audience member later wrote to the show, "I went to a Dr. Phil taping expecting entertainment. I left understanding what true courage looks like." Dr. Phil keeps that letter in his desk drawer, next to the copy of the card he gave Sarah, and next to a photo taken that day, not from the television cameras, but from someone's phone, showing the moment when Linda stood up in the audience and changed everything. The hidden link wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't a dramatic revelation or a planned confrontation. It was a woman in the third row who saw a picture and recognized a ghost. It was a choice to speak up when staying silent would have been easier. It was a television host who understood that some moments are bigger than television. Dr. Phil often says, "You can't change what you don't acknowledge." That day, Linda acknowledged something she hadn't even known she was carrying. Sarah acknowledged that hope could still exist after 15 years of grief. And everyone in that studio acknowledged that the most powerful stories aren't the ones we script, they're the ones that ambush us when we least expect it. If you or someone you know is dealing with a missing person case, resources are available through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Adults and local law enforcement agencies. Never give up hope. Never stop asking questions. And never underestimate the power of speaking up, even when your voice shakes.